So, what if that 5-year plan on your company's whiteboard?
Oh, you mean the one with all the sticky notes?
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. The one with the color-coded sticky notes, the quarterly targets, the heavily engineered metrics.
Hmm.
What if that is actually the exact thing killing your organization's purpose?
That is a terrifying thought for most managers, honestly.
Right. Because we live in this era that just absolutely worships the hustle. I mean, we idolize the grind. We
Hmm.
really think that if we can just like map out a slick enough strategic plan, we can totally engineer our way to meaning.
Yeah, we treat it like a math equation.
Totally. But today we're tearing down that modern obsession because when you step away from the corporate boardroom and you dig into some of these ancient biblical frameworks for leadership, that whiteboard just gets thrown completely out the window.
Yeah, it really does.
We are looking at a landscape of leadership today that is profoundly different from what we're taught in like modern business school.
It's a total demolition, honestly, of how we typically define success. I mean, we treat the word vision like it's this safe, sterile buzzword,
Oh,
right?
yeah, 100%.
We use it to describe personal branding or like a corporate manifesto that no one ever reads.
Right, the plaque on the wall in the lobby.
Exactly, the lobby plaque. But the source material we are exploring today, this really extensive, profound text titled 009 Vision Casting, Inspiring Others to Follow God's Plan. It flips that entirely on its head.
It really does. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. So glad you're here with us. Today's journey is all about deconstructing that exact buzzword vision.
And this text strips away all the ego, which is what I love about it. It argues that true vision isn't something you just, brainstorm over a latte.
Right.
It's a spiritual discipline. It's a sacred revelation that's designed to move a community or even just an individual from drifting aimlessly to actually running with a cohesive purpose.
So, whether you are listening right now and you're leading a massive team at work, or maybe you're trying to manage the absolute chaos of a busy family.
Which is a massive leadership role in itself.
Oh, absolutely. Or maybe you're guiding a local community group, or honestly, you're just trying to find some clear direction in your own life. Understanding the real architecture of a purpose driven vision is basically the ultimate antidote to burnout.
It really is the cure for that low-level aimlessness so many of us feel.
Yeah. But to get there, to really understand it, we have to start by clearing the brush, so to speak. We have to separate genuine vision from two imposters, two things that constantly masquerade as the real thing.
Right. Human ambition and a heavy burden.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's unpack ambition first because, well, I think this is where the modern professional world gets the most tripped up.
Oh, it's the most dangerous trap by far, mostly because our culture actively rewards it.
Yeah, we give it medals.
Exactly. We put it on magazine covers. Ambition looks incredibly productive on the outside. But if we look at the psychology and the spiritual mechanics of it according to the text, ambition is fundamentally asking one question. What can I build for myself?
How can I secure my legacy?
Right. How do I secure my platform, my significance?
Mm.
It is entirely an inward-facing energy. But genuine vision, at least in this ancient framework, asks a radically different question. It asks, what has God shown me for his glory and for the restoration of others?
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because on a Tuesday morning at the office, ambition and vision can look completely identical.
Oh, for sure. They both look like really hard work.
Right. They both involve a person working hard, organizing teams, answering a million emails, trying to achieve a goal. So how do you actually tease them apart in real time?
Well, you have to look at the demands of the leader and the actual fuel source of the work.
The fuel source.
Yeah. So ambition is incredibly impatient. It demands immediate proof. It wants the metrics to go up this quarter
Hmm.
right now so the ego can be validated.
Wow. Yeah.
And because it relies entirely on self-sufficiency and human energy, it has to constantly manufacture its own momentum. That is why it almost always leads to burnout.
Because you are the engine, the fuel, and the steering wheel all at the same time.
Exactly. You're doing it all. But vision, conversely, accepts promise and requires patient endurance. It operates on the understanding of a divine partnership. You aren't generating the outcome entirely on your own. You are participating in a larger design. And that shifts the entire emotional weight of the project.
That distinction right there explains so much about modern leadership fatigue. I mean, when leaders operate purely on ambition, they are trapped on this endless treadmill of seeking applause.
Yeah, and they end up building platforms instead of actually building people.
Right. And because they need to protect that platform, they grip everything so tightly they have to control every tiny detail.
Micromanagement at its finest.
Exactly. But if you are operating out of a genuine vision, it produces this quiet obedience. It produces humility. You're willing to wait for the right timing because your identity isn't tied to immediate visible success.
Right. Ambition might build something that looks super impressive very quickly, but it fades the moment the leader runs out of energy or just leaves the room.
It collapses.
Yeah. But vision might grow at a seemingly agonizing slow pace, but it endures.
Yeah.
The foundation is entirely different. It's the difference between being driven by your own anxieties and being called by a higher purpose.
Which brings us to the second imposter mentioned in the source material, the burden. And I find this one fascinating because it feels so holy.
It really does feel noble.
Yeah, a burden is that deep, holy discomfort you feel when you see what is broken in the world. It's that agonizing gap between what is currently happening and what you know should be happening.
Right. It's seeing the injustice or the pain.
Exactly. But the text is clear. A burden on its own is not a vision, it's just grief. I picture it like this, okay? Imagine you live in a town where the only bridge across a really dangerous river has collapsed.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And you stand on the riverbank every single day, looking at the rubble, watching people struggle to cross, and you feel absolutely devastated. You might even weep over it.
Sure.
That is the burden. The emotion makes you cry. But a vision is when someone hands you the architectural blueprints to build a new, stronger bridge.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, the burden makes you feel the problem, but the vision makes you actually organize a construction crew to fix it.
That imagery captures the exact mechanism of how this works. A burden feels the problem deeply, but if it stays just a burden, it eventually turns into cynicism or despair.
You just become bitter.
Exactly. You just stare at the ruined bridge and complain about the government or the weather. Vision is receiving the assignment to move forward. The framework we are looking at actually defines this mathematically in the text.
Oh, right, the equation. Let's hear it.
It goes like this. Revelation plus calling plus direction plus purpose equals vision.
Wow.
It's an active sequence. You don't just feel bad about the state of the world, you are given a specific, actionable way forward.
Okay, but this raises a huge flashing red light for me. Because, human beings are absolute masters of self-deception.
Oh, the best at it.
Yeah, our brains are wired to rationalize whatever
Right.
we want. So how does a leader or a parent or an entrepreneur actually discern if their grand, exciting idea is a divine vision or if it's literally just their own ego talking dressed up in spiritual language?
It's the critical question.
Mhm.
Because history is littered with catastrophic leaders who mistook their own narcissistic ambition for divine calling.
Yes. So what's the test?
The discernment process the text outlines requires some rigorous objective testing. First, you have to look at alignment. Does this idea align with the established character of God as seen in Scripture?
Right.
True vision never contradicts fundamental truths about justice, mercy, or integrity. If your quote-unquote vision requires you to lie, manipulate, or crush people to achieve it, it's not a divine vision. It's your ego.
That's a brutal but totally necessary audit. If the process destroys the people you are supposedly trying to help, the vision is corrupted.
Precisely. The second test is the fruit it produces in the leader's life. Does this idea make you more humble or more arrogant?
Ooh.
Right. If an idea feeds your ego and demands that everyone recognize your brilliance, you are dealing with ambition. True vision usually makes a leader feel deeply inadequate and reliant on help.
Like, I can't do this alone.
Exactly. Third, you test its endurance. Human excitement is incredibly fragile. It fades the second the budget is cut or the critics get loud.
Oh, totally. We've all been there.
But a true vision persists through the boring, difficult, unglamorous middle phases. And finally, it invites communal obedience. It isn't a solo performance where you are the star. It naturally calls other people to act, to serve, and to build alongside you.
So if vision is the blueprint that keeps us moving from grief to actual construction, we really have to talk about what happens when we lose it.
The unraveling.
Yes. What are the stakes? Because the framework leans heavily on a very famous ancient piece of wisdom, Proverbs 29.18.
Ah, yes. Where there is no vision, the people perish.
Right. We hear that quoted all the time in leadership seminars, but the source material clarifies that the actual translation of that word perish completely changes the psychology of the proverb.
It really does. Because when we hear perish in English, we think of instant physical death. We think, well, I don't have vision for my life right now and I'm still breathing, so this must be an exaggeration.
Right, like I'm not dead yet.
Exactly. But if you dig into the original Hebrew concept, Perish is much closer to the idea of casting off restraint.
Casting off restraint.
Yeah. It means to unravel, to let your hair down in a chaotic, reckless way. It's the loss of direction, discipline, and cohesive purpose. Without vision, people don't just drop dead on the spot, they slowly deteriorate, morally, spiritually, and communally.
It's a slow motion unraveling. I always think about a river when I hear this.
Okay, a river.
Yeah, so a healthy, powerful river has banks, right? The banks physically restrain the water. And because the water is restrained, it moves with incredible force and direction. I mean, it can carve out the Grand Canyon, it can power huge turbines.
Sure.
But what happens if you take away the banks? The water just floods everywhere. It spreads out thin. It becomes this stagnant swamp that destroys the surrounding ecosystem.
No, that's good.
The banks represent the vision, the restraint. Without that restraint, our energy just floods into 1,000 meaningless distractions. Restraint isn't the enemy of a good life, it's the architecture of it.
What a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Restraint is the guardian of joy, not the thief of it.
Yes.
And we look at the psychology of what happens to a community or an organization when those banks disappear. You see that activity immediately replaces alignment,
Say more about that.
where you will see companies or even families that are incredibly frantically busy. They are running endless programs, hosting meetings, scheduling every single minute of the day. They are exhausting themselves.
Sound familiar to anyone listening?
Right. But they are entirely ineffective because everyone is acting on personal impulse rather than a shared restraining mission. Without vision, life becomes circular. You expend massive amounts of energy, but you never actually arrive anywhere.
And honestly, isn't that the exact symptom of our modern culture? I mean, we are the most exhausted, burned out, overscheduled generation in human history.
Without a doubt.
We are swimming in division and superficial growth. People are dragging themselves out of bed, completely depleted, not necessarily because the physical labor is too hard, but because they are working without a why. They are just treading water in that bankless swamp.
And when you lose the why, the mundane details of life become totally unbearable.
Yeah.
Why keep up your daily habits? Why eat healthy? Why show up to marriage counseling? Why pray consistently if you have no sense of the horizon you are walking toward?
It all just feels pointless.
Exactly. When vision fades, the soul grows numb to the present moment. True vision is the stabilizing force that gives profound meaning to the mundane. It's the only thing that gives dignity to the boring, repetitive sacrifices you have to make on a Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, so the stakes are monumental. Losing vision means drifting into chaos. So what does it actually look like to get it right?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. And to answer that, we have to dive into one of the most fascinating historical case studies of visionary leadership ever recorded, which the source material covers in depth, the story of Nehemiah.
Yes.
This is a masterclass in how to move from a state of total ruin to complete restoration. But to appreciate it, we really need to set the scene. For those listening who might not know, who is this guy?
So Nehemiah's context is crucial here. He is a Jewish exile living in the Persian Empire right around the 5th century BC, and he isn't a priest or a prophet.
Okay.
He is the cupbearer to the Persian king Artaxerxes.
The cupbearer. So he tests the wine for poison.
Exactly. Which means he is a highly trusted, high-ranking official. He literally holds the king's life in his hands. He lives in the absolute luxury and security of the royal palace in Susa.
So he's got it made.
He is totally comfortable. He has every earthly reason to just put his head down, enjoy his status, and ignore the problems of the world outside. But then he gets a report from some travelers that the walls of his ancestral city, Jerusalem, are completely broken down, and the gates have been burned with fire.
Wow.
The city is defenseless, and the people left there are in deep, deep distress.
And this is where that progression we talked about earlier kicks in, right? The burden, prayer, discernment, strategy, communication, action.
Yes, the sacred sequence.
When Nehemiah hears about the ruined walls, his first instinct is not to jump into fix-it mode. He doesn't pull out a scroll and start drafting a project management timeline.
No, not at all.
He weeps. He literally sits down, mourns, fasts, and prays for days. This is the burden we talked about. It wrecks him emotionally. But here is where it gets incredibly countercultural. The source points out that he engages in what we can call the sacred pause.
The sacred pause. And I have to say, this is arguably the most ignored leadership principle today.
Oh, we hate pausing.
We are terrified of pauses. If a modern executive took over a failing division and spent the first 3 months just weeping and sitting in silence, the board would fire them immediately for incompetence.
Right. What are we paying you for?
Exactly. We demand immediate visible action to prove that the leader is in control. But Nehemiah sits in the hidden place of prayer for months. He isn't ignoring the problem. He is allowing the weight of the reality to forge his character.
Forge his character.
Yes, there is a deep psychological truth here that the text highlights. Clarity without character is incredibly dangerous.
Say that again? Clarity without character is dangerous.
Yes, because if you get a clear vision of what to do, but your character hasn't been humbled and prepared to carry the weight of it, the vision will either crush you or you will use it to crush others.
That is profound. So the delay wasn't God denying the vision. It was God preparing the leader.
Precisely. Delay is not denial.
Wow. And that preparation leads to the next step, discernment. Eventually, Nehemiah gets permission from the king to go to Jerusalem. But when he arrives, he still doesn't call a massive town hall meeting.
Nope.
He doesn't stand on a soapbox and give a rousing motivational speech about changing the world. He waits until 2 a.m., gets on a horse, and rides out into the dark to quietly inspect the rubble by himself.
Just him and a few trusted guys.
Right. He audits the ruins in secret. Why is that specific detail so important to the framework?
Because visionary leaders must be brutally honest observers of reality. They do not operate on toxic positivity.
Oh, toxic positivity.
Yeah, toxic positivity looks at a collapsed wall and says, well, at least we have a great view now. Let's just focus on the good things.
Look at all this natural light.
Right. But Nehemiah goes out in the dark to physically touch the burned stones. He wants to know exactly how bad the damage is before he ever opens his mouth to lead.
He wants the hard facts.
Yes. He faces the catastrophic reality honestly, while simultaneously holding the belief that restoration is possible. If you don't audit the ruins, your vision is just a fantasy. You can't lead people out of a mess if you refuse to acknowledge how deep the mess actually is.
It's like a new manager coming into a deeply toxic corporate culture. The worst thing they can do on day one is send out this peppy email saying, everything is going to be great, we're a family.
Oh, the team will instantly despise them.
Totally. Because the team knows the culture is broken, they've been bleeding out for years. The Nehemiah approach is to spend weeks quietly reviewing the exit interviews, looking at the failing financials, and understanding the absolute depth of the dysfunction before ever proposing a solution. He maps the pain first.
Exactly. And notice how his deep faith and reliance on God does not make him sloppy or disorganized.
Right.
There is a terrible misconception out there that if you are truly operating on faith, you shouldn't need a plan. You should just, let go and let God.
Yeah, just fly by the seat of your pants.
But look at Nehemiah's strategy. When the Persian king asks him what he needs to rebuild the city, Nehemiah doesn't just say, oh, God will provide, I'm just going to head out.
No, he pulls out a list.
He asks for very specific, highly bureaucratic things. He asks for official letters of transit so he can cross borders safely. He asks for a requisition order for timber from the keeper of the king's forest.
He gets his permits in order.
He does. He even asks for a military escort.
I love that so much. He brings armed guards. Faith sanctifies planning. It doesn't erase the need for it. Asking for resources, negotiating for materials, and having a rigorous logistical strategy isn't a lack of faith. It is the responsible stewardship of the vision you've been given.
It bridges the gap between the spiritual and the material. True visionaries are incredibly practical. They understand that a divine calling still requires wood, stone, sweat, and, legal permissions.
Absolutely. But eventually, right, the quiet audit has to end. The permits are secured, the rubble has been inspected, and Nehemiah finally has to speak.
He has to go public.
He has to look at the demoralized, exhausted people of Jerusalem and say, come, let us build. He has to transfer the blueprint from his own mind into the minds of the community. And this transition brings us to the mechanics of communicating vision, which the source material beautifully captures in another ancient text, the book of Habakkuk.
Yes, Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 2 and 3. This is foundational for understanding the theology of the written word in leadership.
Okay, let's dive into that.
So the prophet Habakkuk is complaining to God about the violence and injustice in the world, another burden, right?
Right.
And God responds with a very specific set of instructions. Write the vision, make it plain on tablets so he may run who reads it. The mechanics here are brilliant in their simplicity.
Write them down for us.
Sure. Write it down for durability, make it plain for clarity, and wait for it with patience.
Let's laser focus on that middle command. Make it plain. Because I think this is where so many brilliant thinkers and leaders
Oh,
fail.
completely.
They have a vision, but it is so dense, so buried in corporate jargon, or so incredibly abstract that no one else can actually grasp it. It's like being handed a beautifully written poetic recipe for a cake.
Okay, a poetic recipe.
Yeah. So the author spends 5 pages describing the sensual aroma of Madagascar vanilla and the cascade of flour looking like winter snow and the passionate transformative heat of the oven.
Sounds delicious, but
Right. It's a gorgeous piece of literature. You feel inspired reading it,
right.
but there are no measurements. There are no oven temperatures. You cannot actually bake a cake with it.
You're just left hungry.
Exactly. Making the vision plain means stripping away the poetry and giving people the exact ingredients so they can run to the kitchen and actually start baking.
That is the exact mechanism Habakkuk is pointing to.
Oh.
Clarity is an act of supreme service to the people you are leading.
An act of service. I like that.
If a vision is too complex, people cannot obey it. They cannot execute it. And what happens in organizations is a phenomenon we can call inspiration without comprehension.
Inspiration without comprehension.
Yeah. A leader gets on stage, gives a soaring emotional speech about changing the world, and everyone applauds. They feel a massive rush of dopamine.
Everyone's hyped.
But on Monday morning, when they sit at their desks, they have absolutely no idea what their immediate next step should be. So what do? They just go back to answering emails.
They default to the mundane.
Exactly. Making it plain translates abstract theological or organizational concepts into daily, actionable obedience.
And the text says, so he may run who reads it. Running implies urgency, momentum, and direction. If I read a clear vision, I shouldn't be standing around confused. I should know exactly what part of the wall I'm supposed to be rebuilding today.
Precisely.
But what about the other part of the command, writing it down on tablets? Why does it matter so much that it is physical and permanent?
Because human memory is deeply flawed,
Yeah.
and human emotion is wildly volatile.
Fair enough.
When you are in the middle of a crisis, or when you are just exhausted from the daily grind, you will forget why you started. You will lose sight of the horizon. Writing the vision down gives it permanence outside of the leader's emotional state.
That makes sense.
It survives leadership transitions. It survives economic slumps. When the community hits a wall of discouragement, they don't have to rely on the leader to give another emotional speech. They could look at the tablet. They could look at the written charter.
It's objective.
Right. The written word acts as an anchor. Habakkuk goes on to say, though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. When the fulfillment is delayed, the written vision is the proof that the promise hasn't changed, even if the timeline has.
Okay, so Nehemiah gives us the progression from burden to action, and Habakkuk gives us the mechanics of writing it clearly. But if we stop there, I think we might walk away thinking that vision is just this simple one-size-fits-all formula.
Right, like a recipe.
Yeah, like if you just pray, write it on a whiteboard, and organize your timber, everything works perfectly every time. But the framework we are exploring shatters that idea by providing this incredible hall of faith.
Ah, yes, the Hall of Faith.
It takes us through the lives of several historical figures to prove that true vision is actually deeply dynamic. It stretches and alters the leader in totally unexpected, multifaceted ways.
The survey of these figures is fascinating because it proves that God does not interact with human leaders like a vending machine.
Input coin, get vision.
Exactly. The way vision manifests depends entirely on the context and what needs to be accomplished. Let's start with Abraham.
Okay.
His vision required him to walk by promise before he had possession. He was essentially told, leave your home, leave your security, and go to the land I will show you.
He had to move without a map.
He had to act on the revelation alone, leaving the known for the completely unknown. That is a terrifying psychological leap.
It's the ultimate test of trust. And then you contrast that with Moses. Moses encounters God at the burning bush. And what I love about Moses is how intensely relatable his reaction is.
Oh, he's so human in that moment.
Right. He doesn't say, finally, I knew I was destined for greatness. Give me the staff. Let's go free the slaves. No, he has a massive attack of imposter syndrome.
He tries to get out of it.
He starts arguing with the burning bush. He says, who am I? I stutter. I'm a murderer in hiding. I am entirely unqualified for this.
And pay close attention to the mechanics of how that vision is established in the text. God does not validate Moses' ego.
What do you mean?
God doesn't give him a personality test and say, actually, Moses, you have great latent leadership skills. You're an ENFJ.
Right, you have great communication potential.
No. God simply says, I will be with you. Moses' story proves that divine vision depends entirely on the presence and power of the one giving the vision, not on the human competence of the one receiving it.
Oh, that takes so much pressure off the leader to be perfect.
It really does.
Hmm.
Then the framework moves to Ezekiel. And this is a wild, almost surreal example.
The dry bones.
Yes, Ezekiel is taken to a valley full of dry bones. It's a battlefield of bleached skeletons. And the vision requires him to prophesy, to speak life over these dead bones until they reassemble and breathe again.
It sounds like a horror movie, honestly.
It does. But if we apply that to the real world, this is the vision required for impossible turnaround situations.
Oh, like when a situation is just completely dead.
Exactly.
Right.
Human eyes look at a shattered marriage or a deeply toxic bankrupt company or a community ravaged by addiction and they only see a graveyard. Logic says cut your losses and walk away. This is dead.
Right.
But Ezekiel's paradigm of vision is about speaking the truth of restoration into a situation that is empirically, undeniably lifeless. It's about holding the space for a miracle where human strategy has completely failed.
That is heavy. And then there's Peter. This one is all about internal paradigm shifts, right?
Yes. Peter is on a rooftop, and he receives this bizarre vision of a sheet being lowered from heaven filled with all these animals that his religion, his culture, and his entire upbringing have told him are unclean.
Stuff he's not supposed to touch or eat.
Exactly. And the voice tells him to eat. He refuses because he is a good, law-abiding man. And the voice says, "What God has cleansed, do not call common."
Wow.
This is perhaps the most disruptive type of vision. For Peter, vision wasn't about building a wall like Nehemiah or moving to a new country like Abraham. It was about dismantling centuries of ingrained cultural and religious boundaries.
There's an internal renovation.
Exactly. It completely shifted his understanding of who was included in God's plan. The Gentiles were suddenly brought in. True vision will constantly disrupt your comfort zones. It will force you to abandon your prejudices and reevaluate who you are willing to sit at a table with.
Which flows perfectly into the story of Paul, because if anyone understood disruption, it was him.
Oh, definitely.
But I actually have to push back a bit on this one. Because we just spent a whole segment talking about Habakkuk, right?
Yeah.
And how vision needs to be written down, made plain, and executed clearly so people can run with it.
Right.
But then you look at Paul's Macedonian call. Paul had a very clear strategic missionary map drawn up. He and his team were heading into Asia. And then in the middle of the night, he gets a vision of a man in Macedonia begging for help.
Yes.
And Paul wakes up and completely derails his current well-planned strategy. Doesn't that cause massive whiplash for a team? I mean, you look at your team on Tuesday and say, we are marching to Asia. And on Wednesday morning, you say, never mind, pack it up. We're crossing the sea to Europe. That sounds like the chaotic, bankless river we were just warning against.
That is such a fair pushback. It's a brilliant tension to highlight in the text. What looks like whiplash to the human eye is actually divine course correction.
Course correction.
Yeah. The critical mechanism here is loyalty. The framework argues that a leader's loyalty to God's ultimate purpose must always override their loyalty to their own strategic plan.
Oh, wow.
Vision is not a static document locked in a vault. It is a living compass. When human ambition makes a plan, it resists change at all costs because the ego is invested in the original design. I said we are going to Asia, so we are going to Asia, or I look weak.
Ah, right. The ego defends the plan.
Precisely. But true vision welcomes correction because its ultimate commitment is to obedience, not to the initial blueprint. Paul recognized that the interruption wasn't a failure of his planning, it was a redirection.
That takes a lot of humility.
Immense humility. For a leader to stand in front of their team and say, I thought we were supposed to go left, but I have received new clarity and we must go right. That isn't chaos. That is highly responsive alignment.
And finally, the framework points to Jesus as the ultimate model of visionary leadership.
The pinnacle. He didn't just hand out a list of rules. He cast vision through parables, completely reshaping how people perceive reality, power, and love.
And he held on to the ultimate purpose of the Father, even when that vision led directly to the brutal reality of the cross.
Exactly. He stayed the course.
Which is the perfect pivot to our next major reality check. Because, listener, the moment you step into this kind of bold, map-altering, culture-shifting vision, whether you are Abraham leaving home, Paul changing continents, or just a manager trying to implement a healthier culture in your office, you are going to hit a wall.
Guaranteed.
You are going to face intense resistance. And the source material doesn't shy away from this. It brings us face to face with the absolute inevitability of opposition. Let's go back to Nehemiah for a second.
Okay, back to the wall.
When Nehemiah finally gets the people organized and they start stacking the stones to rebuild the wall, it isn't a peaceful construction site.
No, not at all. The text introduces these external characters, Sanballat and Tobiah.
The antagonists.
Yes, these were regional officials who had personally benefited from Jerusalem being weak and broken. As soon as the wall starts going up, they show up to mock the workers. They hurl insults.
Like playground bullies.
Exactly. But then they escalate to political threats and eventually the threat of outright military violence. They try everything to derail the rebuild.
And the definitive statement the framework makes here is staggering, really.
Hmm?
It says, opposition does not cancel vision, it often confirms it.
That is so deeply counterintuitive to how we are wired today.
It really is. We usually think, if God is in this, it should be easy, the door should just swing open, the budget should be approved instantly, everyone should applaud.
Right, good vibes only.
Exactly. And if things get hard, our default assumption is that we made a mistake and heard God wrong.
But if we look at the psychology of resistance, it makes perfect sense why opposition is inevitable. Vision introduces movement, and movement disrupts comfort.
People hate change.
They inherently fear it. Sanballat and Tobiah felt threatened because the balance of power in the region was shifting. They were losing their leverage over a weak city. In your own life, when you start setting boundaries or when you start leading your family toward healthier habits, the people who benefited from your lack of boundaries are going to push back.
Oh, that hits close to home.
It does. They will mock you, they will doubt your motives, and they might even actively sabotage you. The sources of opposition are deeply human: fear, jealousy, the desire for control. But the text also points out there's a very real element of spiritual warfare. The enemy of the soul hates restoration.
I picture opposition like the wind against a sailboat.
Okay, I like that.
If you are just floating aimlessly in the water, you hardly feel the wind. You're just drifting with it. But the moment you raise the sail and set a destination, the wind hits you. It strains the mast, the boat pitches and
It
rolls.
feels like you're under attack.
Right. It feels violent, and an inexperienced sailor might think, the wind is trying to destroy me, I need to take the sail down. But a skilled sailor knows that the resistance of the wind is actually the exact mechanism you use to move forward. You tack against it.
Yes.
You don't eliminate the wind. You navigate it. You use the resistance to push you toward the horizon.
That analogy captures the essence of perseverance perfectly. Ease is not a sign of divine favor, and difficulty is not a sign of divine absence. Resistance actually refines the vision.
It tests it.
Exactly. It forces you to audit your motives. Are you doing this for applause, or are you doing this because you were truly called to it? It deepens your dependence on the architect of the vision.
So, on a practical Tuesday afternoon level, how do you handle it? If you are facing opposition mockery from coworkers, resistance from your teenagers, or just intense internal doubt, what do you do?
Well, the text highlights Nehemiah's legendary response to his critics.
Oh, I love this part. As the wall gets higher and the opposition gets more desperate, Sanballat and Tobiah send messages to Nehemiah saying, come down to the Valley of Ono, let's have a meeting. Let's negotiate.
It's a trap, obviously.
A total trap. But Nehemiah's response is the ultimate masterclass in boundary setting and focus. He sends a message back saying, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you?
It is one of the most powerful leadership statements in history. He refuses to be distracted.
He just shuts it down.
He refuses to let his critics dictate his schedule or his emotional state. He doesn't go down to debate them. He doesn't write a long defensive PR statement about his character. He just keeps building.
I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. We should literally all have that on a sticky note on our monitors.
Definitely.
But he wasn't naive about the danger either. He didn't just ignore them and hope they'd go away.
No, and that's the dual approach that makes Nehemiah so brilliant. He
Yeah.
prayed. He brought the anxiety and the threats directly to God, but he also posted armed guards along the vulnerable parts of the wall.
The sword and the trowel.
Yes. The framework notes that faith does not ignore reality. It engages it wisely. The historical account says the people literally built the wall with a trowel for mortar in one hand and a sword in the other.
I mean, what an image.
They were ready to build, and they were ready to defend. It is the perfect synthesis of spiritual dependence and fierce practical wisdom. You don't just pray about the failing department. You pray, and you implement rigorous new accountability structures. Tool in one hand, weapon in the other.
Surviving opposition with a sword and a trowel is one thing. But if you want a vision to outlast the initial crisis, if you want it to become a generational reality, It has to be married to the daily grind.
The everyday stuff.
Yes, the grand horizon has to connect the mundane footsteps. And this brings us to the final, incredibly vital concept in our deep dive today, the harmony of vision and mission alignment.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
Hmm.
Honestly, if you get this wrong, everything we've talked about falls apart. We have to draw a razor-sharp distinction between vision and mission.
Because we use those words interchangeably all the time.
All the time. But they are entirely different mechanisms. Vision is the horizon. It is the destination, the restored city, the healthy family, the equitable company. Mission is the road you travel to get there. It defines who you are, what your daily practices are, and how you behave while you are walking toward the horizon.
Let's use a car analogy here. Vision is the GPS destination. You punch the beach and you can see it on the map. It's beautiful, it's inspiring. Mission is the engine of your car. It's the pistons firing, the oil moving, the literal mechanics of forward motion.
That's spot on.
If you separate the two, you get massive organizational and personal distortion. Let's look at the first distortion the text mentions. Vision without mission. The GPS is set, the beach looks great on the screen, but the engine is dead.
The framework calls this the illusion of progress. It is pure fantasy. You have a charismatic leader painting this glorious, intoxicating picture of the future. The people are inspired, they're cheering.
Everyone's hyped up.
But they aren't actually being formed. There's no daily discipline, no mission, no engine to actually get them to the horizon. They're just sitting in the driveway listening to beach music, pretending they are moving. It's all talk, no traction.
Okay, but on the flip side, you have mission without vision. The engine is roaring. You are going 80 miles an hour, but the GPS is turned off.
This is the trap of maintenance. People are incredibly busy. They are doing all the right things, running the programs, holding the meetings, sending the emails, but they have entirely lost the why.
They're just driving in circles.
Exactly. It becomes an exhausting, soulless routine. The community becomes entirely focused on preserving the institution rather than reaching the destination.
It makes me think of an orchestra.
An orchestra, okay.
Yeah, so if everyone has incredibly expensive, beautifully tuned instruments and they are playing with intense focus, that's the mission, right? The daily practice.
Right.
But if they're all looking at completely different sheet music because there is no shared vision, you don't get a symphony. You just get a terrifying racket.
Yeah.
You need the conductor to bring alignment, to make sure the mission of the instruments is serving the overarching vision of the song.
And when that alignment is lost, you start to see what we can call quiet fractures in an organization or a family.
Quiet fracture.
Yeah. These fractures happen when what is loudly proclaimed from the stage does not match what is actually practiced in the hallways. The classic example from the text is a community or a church that loudly claims its vision is deep spiritual discipleship and caring for the vulnerable.
Okay.
But if you look at their actual mission, their budget, their staff rewards, their daily metrics, they only celebrate and fund crowd-drawing entertainment.
Oh, that is devastating. The vision says discipleship, but the engine only runs on spectacle.
Exactly. And that misalignment breeds deep hypocrisy. It creates profound confusion among the people, and eventually it leads to massive burnout. The people hear one message, but their daily reality is completely contradictory.
So what's the fix?
Coherence. Coherence, which is the ultimate sign of organizational and personal health, is when the vision of the horizon, the mission of the road, and the daily practices of the people all sing the exact same note.
But how does a leader or even a parent actually spot this quiet fracture before the whole thing falls apart? Because it is quiet. It sneaks up on you while you are busy answering emails and fighting fires.
It requires a ruthless, ongoing audit. Leaders must regularly pause and ask, do our actual daily activities move us toward the vision we claim to care about?
The audit?
Look at your calendar and your bank account. Are you funding the things you say are your highest priorities? But even more critically, the leader must model the coherence personally.
Oh, yeah. They have to live it.
If a leader casts a vision for sacrifice, community, and service, but they personally live a life of insulated privilege, demanding VIP treatment at every turn, their credibility is instantly destroyed.
Yeah.
You cannot proclaim a vision that you refuse to embody in your own life. The medium is the message.
Wow. Okay, let's pull all the threads together because we have taken an epic, expansive journey through some truly ancient and powerful concepts today.
We really have covered a lot of ground.
We started by tearing down the modern idol of ambition, realizing that true vision isn't about building a platform, it's about divine partnership. We looked at the slow motion unraveling of the bankless river when vision is lost. We walked with Nehemiah through the ruined walls, learning the absolute necessity of the sacred pause and auditing the mess in the dark.
We explored the mechanics of Habakkuk, understanding that making a vision clear is an act of service, and writing it down anchors us against the volatility of our own emotions.
Yes. We walked through the Hall of Faith. We saw Moses battle imposter syndrome, Ezekiel speak life into a graveyard, Peter dismantle cultural prejudices, and Paul embrace the whiplash of divine redirection.
And we learned that when the wind of opposition hits, you don't drop the sail, you tack forward, with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other.
Exactly. And finally, we realized that the GPS of the vision must be connected to the engine of a daily mission, or the whole thing is just an illusion.
And bringing this all back to you, the listener, this has not been a historical lecture about ancient prophets, and it isn't just a manual for Fortune 500 CEOs.
Right.
This framework is deeply personal. Whether you are navigating a brutal career transition, trying to lead your family through a crisis, or just trying to find the cohesive thread in your own daily life, you need the architecture of a higher purpose to keep from drifting.
You need those riverbanks.
Exactly. Without it, you are just expending energy in a swamp. You need the banks of the river to give your life power and direction.
It is the framework that holds our humanity together. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. It's a provocative, deeply searching question that emerges right out of the core of this framework. We talked earlier about the burden, that holy discomfort. So here is the question. What breaks your heart?
Such a powerful question.
When you look at your industry, your community, your family, or the world at large, what is the ruined wall that makes you want to weep? Because what you grieve over just might be the exact place where your divine vision is waiting to be born. Are you willing to sit in that holy discomfort in the dark long enough to let the blueprint emerge?
It's the ultimate diagnostic question for the soul.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep searching, keep asking the hard questions, and keep running toward clarity. Until next time.